I have here restaurants that did not do well when the health inspector showed up. First, well, this isn't a restaurant, but people do eat there. The 7-Eleven.
Oh, yes.
This is the one at Piper Station, and we've had these guys on before. Now, they had a 91, but a repeat violation. The person in charge had zero food safety training.
Come on.
Which might explain why a lot of the food they served was not hot enough on the little rollers and stuff. The boneless wings, the spicy wings, the buffalo wings, the taquitos, which are those little round stuffed something.
It's a taco.
It's a rolled up taco. None of them were hot enough. That was a repeat violation. And the inspector said, look, if you guys don't learn how to keep things hot enough, we may just have to pull your permit.
They
had a spray bottle that was labeled sanitizer, had some kind of blue liquid in it. They had no idea what it was.
It's Kool-Aid, it's fine.
That's right. Squirt a little in your mouth when you get hot. The food services were not clean, and that was a repeat violation. So that's the 7-Eleven Piper Station of 91.
No, thank you.
But it gets a lot worse. We've never had these guys on before. On Central Avenue, it's called Three Sabor.
Okay. I know Sabor, but
this is Three Sabor.
Okay.
And 88. Observe the person in charge not ensuring proper temperatures, according to the health inspector, and not ensuring proper labeling of food, had to coach the person in charge.
Come on, that's never a good sign.
And no one there could identify illnesses that were supposed to keep them at home. In other words, if you're sick, don't come to work if you have diarrhea or vomiting or a fever. None of them knew that.
Oh, come on.
Really? Yeah.
That seems pretty basic to me.
Me too. Observed a staff member come in with pans of food and put on gloves and began plating food and not washing.
Of course.
And this was the other problem. They had some kind of lunch coach parked out back, and they were bringing food in from there.
Oh, well, that's an itchy kitchen.
Yeah. The coach was not licensed for that.
Yeah.
It's like, don't do that.
That's I've got questions. I don't know.
Yeah, what's going on in that little van back there?
Where did the inspector go back there? Because that's important.
The inspector did, but just told them to stop bringing food from back there because it wasn't licensed. But if you got a kitchen, I don't get it. That's weird. They had no date marking on much of anything there. And it said, if you have food that's been sitting around for 4 hours and you haven't sold it, throw it out.
Yeah. Please.
And don't put it back in the van. So that's 3 Sabor on Central Avenue 88. Now we have a return to the Hall of Shame. This is the Chili's that we had on last month.
Wow.
Down in Monroe. Last month they had an 87.5.
Okay.
This month an 86.
Oh, wow. So the hits keep coming.
Yeah, I mean, somebody at the corporate office hasn't learned that this Chili's has problems. Observed an employee wash hands too quick. Just rub their hands together. The employee had to be coached on how to rewash.
Isn't there a song you can sing when you sing happy birthday or something?
That's right. You sing happy birthday twice while you're singing. That's supposed to be the right amount of time. That's what they tell us anyway. Observed many multi-use pans and utensils that were still dirty even though they were supposed to be clean. They thought they were clean, but they were not. A lot of items stored way too warm. Shredded cheese, cooked onions, ranch, turkey, roast beef, and jalapeno sausage. All of them too warm, and that was a repeat violation.
Gosh,
this place is a mess.
Yeah.
They had 3 open gallons of milk with absolutely no date on it. So who knows how long the milk had been there, and
the old smell test.
Yep, they got rid of it. Had to pour it out. Observed the prep top cooling unit was not properly holding foods at the right temperature. Well, no wonder stuff was warm. And that was a repeat violation that the unit wasn't working.
Yeah, they should have gotten that fixed. Come on.
So the Chili's Bar and Grill on Highway 74 in Monroe is just a disaster. 87 last month and an 86.
I will pass. Corporate needs to get on that. That's shocking to me. Chili's baby back ribs.
Barbecue sauce.
Listening in to these restaurants, so let's have a little look through some of the issues that we have. So again, we're looking at there's managers who are either not trained or that they're not they're not up to date on what they should know, or they're not controlling the situations that are going on in these restaurant kitchens. We've got lots of time and temperature of use, which just seems to be this consistent thing that's happening. Chemical contamination issues, right? That blue liquid that's in an unlabeled spray container. It could be lethal if you start spraying the wrong things in the wrong areas. You could poison lots of people. Washing, rinsing, and sanitizing surfaces, just the basic stuff that we do in here every single day, and they're not doing out there. And then we had food labeling, things like the milk that had no label. I've never bought a gallon of milk that didn't have a date label on it, so I don't even know how that would happen. We should always have labels on these types of things, or you shouldn't accept it coming in the door if it doesn't have that kind of labeling. And then approved food sources, that the guy that's pulling stuff out of the truck, you just can't have stuff like that going on. Incorrect hand washing, where they had to instruct grown adults how to wash their hands properly. It's nonsensical. And then refrigerators not working correctly. Yeah, that's an ongoing problem that should be addressed by management, because otherwise, not only do you have the possibility of poisoning people, allowing bacterial growth to occur at a significant rate, but also you're going to get food spoilage, which that's just taking away from your profit margin as well by having to throw food out because it's spoiling quicker than it should. And none of this makes any sense. Anyway, so today we're going to be concentrating on the second and third of the flow of food. So we're going to be looking at preparation and at service. So let's kick in with preparation first. Okay, so we have a situation here. Is this food being prepared correctly? So this individual is not preparing one sandwich at a time. They're doing 3 sandwiches at a time. However, they have all of the, chicken salad maybe? They have the whole vat of chicken salad out of the refrigerator all at one time. Is that correct or incorrect? So what's the problem with it? Yep. So we've got time and temperature abuse happening there, right? The thing that would make more sense is to have smaller containers so that you can pull that out to make those 3 sandwiches and serve those, and then so you have a smaller amount that would come out of the refrigerator a few times before it's all going to be used up. But to use up that whole vat of tuna salad or chicken salad, whatever it is, it's going to take a lot of sandwiches, and so it's going to spend a lot of time. By the time you get to the end of that, it's going to spend a lot of time outside the refrigerator. So yeah, that's a problem. Food and color additives are an important thing that we need to understand, because there are times that we add colors to some of our foods. There are sometimes we're not allowed to as well. So only ever use additives that are approved by your local regulatory authority. So the types of food coloring that we can get at the grocery store, those are all permitted. If we're going to use that on maybe icing for cakes and various different things like that, those are all permitted. We can also, of course, use natural colors. When we made our pasta, we used some tomato dust as we dehydrated tomatoes. We dehydrated spinach to use the chlorophyll from that to make green. So you can use natural colors as well. This is more specifically to do with artificial colors that you can purchase and various different additives that you can purchase. So never use more additives than are allowed by law. Never use additives to alter the appearance of food. So say if you've got some ground beef and it's got a little on the, if it's actually been sitting out in the air and it's oxidized a little, then it can go from being that red kind of color down to being a kind of a brownish kind of tinge. Never try and add red food coloring, as some places may try, to make it look more fresh and meaty, right? So never try and make something look like it's more than something that it really is. Okay. Don't try and sell produce that's treated with sulfites before it was received in the operation. Those are preservatives, and never add sulfites to produce that will be eaten raw. Do not use the following to misrepresent the appearance of food. Food additives or colors, colored over wraps, right? So you can actually get cling wrap that's red. We got some, my wife got some at Christmas time actually. We're still using it at home, and I don't like it because I can't see the actual appearance of the food underneath. but it has been used in the past. Some stores will purposely, over that ground beef, they'll put a red cling wrap over it because it makes it pop. It makes it look, ooh, look how fresh that looks. But you're not looking at the meat. You're looking at that rosy red color that's coming through from the cling wrap. Or lighting as well. Right? When you're in a grocery store, when you're purchasing things, you should have good, clear, white lighting so that it's not giving an incorrect appearance. You should do the same thing in your receiving area, in your restaurant kitchen, so that way when things come in, you can see it properly. You don't want to have some dim lighting that you can't really see the appearance of it correctly. Okay. Food that was not presented honestly must be thrown out. Food must be thrown out when it's handled by staff who have been restricted or excluded due to illness, or if it's contaminated by hands or bodily fluids. Never a good day. Or it's exceeded the time and temperature requirements designated to keep food safe. We'll go into those in a little while. If packaging fish using a reduced oxygen packaging method, so we're talking about vacuum sealed fish, right? Then the fish must be frozen before, during, or after the packaging process. It has to be frozen. Include a label that states the fish must be frozen until it's used, and always check the labeling as well. Okay, it's very important because in a reduced environment, in a reduced oxygen environment, when things are vacuum sealed, there are some bacteria, some lethal bacteria, that actually thrive in an absence of oxygen. So if they're in that kind of setting and they're just refrigerated, then they can grow very, very quickly. When they're frozen, they don't. They go dormant. And so as long as that fish is frozen and maintained frozen until it's cooked, then it's perfectly safe. But you're opening up the opportunity of danger if you don't. Okay, prepping produce. So produce can be treated to control pathogens, use chemicals or water containing ozone. Check with your local regulatory authority as to what's specifically permitted. When soaking or storing the produce in standing water or in an ice water slurry, so if you have water and ice mix, then do not mix different items. Right? If I've got 4 different types of lettuce that we're taking out, then do one, empty that water out, refill, do the next one. Do them in separate ones so that you don't get cross-contamination that could have occurred. So with when we had the romaine scare a few years back, where there was E. coli in a lot of romaine all the way across the country, if you had that romaine washing in that sink, and then you just decided to throw in the frise lettuce and the iceberg lettuce all in that same sink, guess what? Everything's got that E. coli in it now. So do them in separate batches. If you have the same item, so if you have 10 boxes of romaine lettuce and it all came from the same operation, it's okay to be able to do those in one single batch. Okay. Does this need to be refrigerated for safety? So I got a thumbs up there. How about from the rest of everyone? Or a thumbs down? You got a thumbs up? Yes, it does need to be refrigerated. So when you first buy tomatoes, when you go to the grocery store, they don't keep tomatoes in a refrigerator. It actually makes them go kind of mealy. It actually is detrimental to the quality of the tomato. However, when you slice it, it's now open to the environment. It's now a perfect living petri dish for bacteria to enjoy. Right? And they love it because there's lots of sugar in the tomatoes that they can live on. So yes, once you slice those tomatoes, they must be refrigerated. Does this need to be refrigerated? We've got some melons, some sliced melons. Yep, absolutely. Same reason. Once you slice into that melon, now it's open, and how much sugar is there in melon? Tons, right? That's why we enjoy it. It's like candy, right? It's nature's candy. Bacteria love it too. Does this need to be refrigerated for safety? I think we're good here, right? How about this, our lettuce? Does this need to be refrigerated for safety? Yes, absolutely. Because again, this lettuce does have a sugar level in there, so there is food for that bacteria to live on. Ice. This is something that can be overlooked at times, but it's vital because it's obviously ice needs to be treated in a similar way to ready-to-eat foods, because I can't heat treat the ice, right? doesn't stay as ice. So never use ice as an ingredient if it was used to keep food cold. So if you had a display with a bunch of Coke cans on it, keeping those Coke cans cold, you can never use that ice again for food purposes, right? It seems like common sense, but it happens where people may come in and they just think, oh, I'll just put my water bottle right in the ice here. It'll be fine. How dirty can a water bottle be? Well, it's as dirty as the floor in that warehouse that it was put on before it was delivered to the grocery store and put on their floor, and then it was taken home by you to your home and placed in the refrigerator to chill it down, right? So, yeah, the outside of that water bottle is probably filthy. The inside of it, hopefully, is a lot cleaner. So hold or carry ice in containers that hold raw meat, seafood, or poultry, or chemicals. We should never do that because you're just going to contaminate it. Even if it's been cleaned out, we shouldn't use those kinds of containers for this purpose. Never touch ice with hands or use glass to scoop ice. I've seen it, and I've seen people break glasses in the ice bin where we had to burn off all of the ice because they literally they scooped the ice out with a glass and the bottom stem snapped off. That was a bad evening. But never try and use anything apart from the ice scoop. The ice scoop should be the only thing that ever goes into that ice bin. Always store ice scoops outside of the machine and in a clean, protected location, right? Because if that ice scoop is filthy, then guess what? You're dipping a filthy ice scoop right into the ice. You need a variant if prepping foods in these ways. So a variant means that you need to get special permission. Okay, anytime you see something that says a variant, it means that special permission has been granted. So if you're packaging fresh juice on site for sale at a later time, so it means that you're not just literally squeezing oranges right in front of the customer and giving them a glass of fresh squeezed orange juice. If you're squeezing it, putting it into a container, and you're putting it into a refrigerator to then be sold later on, then you need a special variant. These types of things will start to ferment very quickly, like within hours they start to ferment because they're not being heat treated. Let's see. Unless if when the packaging of the fresh juice on site for later time, make sure that unless if the juice has a warning label on it to tell the customers about the dangers of it. Smoking food to preserve it, but not to enhance flavor. So we have our grill out there on our deck that has a smoking unit on it. So we can smoke foods. So say if we've got some chicken breast that we're cooking on there and we want to infuse some smoked flavors to it, it's perfectly acceptable as part of the cooking process to add some smoky flavor to it. But if we are smoking it without cooking it, purely for the purpose of preserving it, which that's very possible to do. When you have a side of smoked salmon, that smoked salmon is raw, but it's been preserved by the smoking process. You have to have a variant. You have to have special permission because you have to prove to the local regulatory authority that you have done it correctly. Okay, because if you don't, then you're going to poison some people. Using food additives or components to preserve or alter the food so it no longer needs time and temperature control for safety. So anytime you're adding any kind of salting processes to make sure that foods are preserved. So if you're making something like salmon gravlax, you don't cook that salmon when you're making salmon gravlax, or lox, as some people will call it. So when you do that, literally you're curing it. You're salt curing it. By salt curing it, it actually takes away the available water. But if you don't do it right, then you're allowing bacteria to grow in that salmon. Again, you can be poisoning someone. Anytime that you're curing food, you have to be very careful to make sure that you're doing it correctly. You need a variant if you're custom processing animals for personal use, like dressing deer. Right? There's a lot of hunters in this area. You have to have a special variant. You have to have special permission because you have to prove that you can do it safely. That you're not just going to, sure, anyone with the skills can break down a deer, But the fact is that deer has to be processed in a safe environment so that the meat is safe to eat afterwards. Okay. Packaging foods using a reduced oxygen packaging (ROP) method. So again, if you're in a similar way to where we were talking about the fish a few minutes ago, if you're making vacuum-packed food products to preserve it, then you need to have a special variance, okay? Because in that reduced oxygen environment, there are some lethal bacteria that grow very, very rapidly. Sprouting seeds or beans. So we have to, if you got over on our windowsill here, we're sprouting seeds and beans to go into our vegetables or into our salad. You have to have a special variance for that, just to prove that you're making sure that they're going to be clean and fit for purpose when they're consumed. Because inside the dirt that you may be sprouting these seeds, you may actually be harboring some lethal bacteria. Offering live shellfish for display in a tank. So if you have a big lobster tank that you're saying, you can say to the customers, why don't you go ahead and pick out your lobster? We'll scoop it out for you and we'll cook that one up for you. You have to have a variance for that because you have to care for those lobsters in a way that's not going to allow bacterial growth. Because in a fish tank, if you've ever owned a fish tank and you see how quickly it goes green, anyone ever seen Finding Nemo? Right, when they break the filtering system in there, it goes green really fast. Yeah, you don't want to be eating what's in that tank. Right, and if you've got shellfish that are in that tank and that tank isn't balanced correctly, then the shellfish in there can start taking in a lot of the toxins, concentrating the toxins inside their flesh, and as we know, that can turn into a bad situation very quickly. All right, so a hazard plan. Hazard, what is that? So hazard analysis with critical control points. We're going to go over this in some pretty good detail. A hazard plan may be required when applying for a variance. So this is where you have to prove that you can do it the safest possible way. The plan must account for food safety risks. The establishment must comply with the plan and the procedures. You can't say, well, we wrote this hazard plan, but it kind of gets in the way that I have to cook this chicken to 165, so we're just going to cook it to 140 and we'll just say it's good. Right? You can't do that. If you're submitting this hazard plan that gives specific information on there, you have to abide by that. And records have to be provided and maintained on all of these things. Just like we maintain refrigerator records on the temperatures of our refrigerators, you have to do that if you have a hazard plan because you have a variance where you're giving special permission to do something that most places are not allowed. So records must show that you are regularly following procedures for monitoring critical control points, monitoring the critical control points themselves, and verifying the effectiveness of the operation or the processes. Take the necessary corrective actions if there is a failure at one of those critical control points. Okay, so let's talk about thawing. We've looked at this quite a lot over the period of our ProStart course. But so freezing does not kill pathogens, right? The molds, the viruses, the bacteria that can hurt us, the pathogens, freezing them doesn't kill them. They just go dormant. They just go to sleep for as long as it takes in some cases. So we should never be thawing our food at room temperature. We should always be doing it under a controlled environment. So we have 4 different options. And these are the only 4 you're ever allowed to use. So the best is in a cooler. Right? So if anyone ever asks you what is the safest way and the way that you're going to preserve the best quality of your food, then you do it in a cooler. Well, our coolers are about, 34 degrees? It's going to take a long time for that food to defrost. So it may take days in some cases. If you're doing a turkey for Thanksgiving, then that turkey may literally take 3 days to defrost fully. Well, so that's where you have to make a plan to make sure you got it in the refrigerator at the right time. Otherwise, if it's the night before Thanksgiving, then it's like, oh, what am I going to do now? All right, so you can submerge it under running water. The running water should be about 70 degrees or lower. Generally, our running water is on the cooler side, so it's generally about 70 degrees. So having running water, and I'm not talking about like just millions of gallons of water just bucketing over it. You just have to have a steady, gentle stream of water coming over it. This way it's refreshing that water that's in there. And so what we're making sure of is that we're not allowing that food to go above 41, right? Because that frozen turkey is 0 degrees when it comes out of the freezer or less. And so we're allowing it to come up so that it will defrost. Defrosting will occur 32 degrees or thereabouts. That turkey, in fact, will probably defrost at about 30 degrees. But we must never allow it to get over 41 and get into the temperature danger zone. Because that turkey is at 0 degrees when it first goes in the water, it's literally like a giant ice cube. So all we're doing is, as we're gently letting some water just sprinkle down onto it in that when it's submerged in that sink or in that container, all we're allowing it to do is to stay like ice water. So as long as it comes up to about 30 degrees, then it's going to defrost that turkey fully a lot quicker than it would in the refrigerator. Now, obviously, if I have something, if I have something which is which can't be submerged underwater, then this method isn't going to work for us. So that's when you can use a microwave oven. However, the problem with microwave ovens, as we know, is that they unevenly heat. You may even find that as you're defrosting something in a microwave, that it actually starts to cook some parts of it and not even properly defrosting other parts. So, it's just the way that they work. But you can defrost things in there, but it's not going to be the best result with the best quality of your food. The last thing you can do, the last resort, you can take that turkey, that frozen turkey, you can put it in the oven and have it defrost as part of the cooking process. Now with a big turkey, that's probably going to wreck it, because by the time it reaches 165 at its core internal temperature, the outside, the wings, all sorts of parts like that, they're going to be ruined, right? But you can. This could be suitable though for something like burgers. Right? If you have burger patties that are in the freezer, there's nothing wrong with taking them directly out of the freezer, putting it straight on the grill, and they'll grill up just fine because they're relatively thin. So that is a workable thing for a smaller piece of meat or a smaller item to be able to cook it, to be able to defrost it as part of the cooking process. Okay, those 4 are the only 4 you can ever do though. Okay, let's take a look at some minimum internal temperatures. This is really important that you remember these, but just remember them in the same way that they go in the exact opposite direction as what we have in the refrigerator. So the most dangerous are at the bottom, and so the highest temperature we have to achieve is the item that we put at the bottom of our refrigerator. So starting off with poultry, so whole or ground chicken, turkey, or duck must be cooked to 165. It's the highest temperature we have to cook anything to. But this also includes stuffing that's made with fish, meat, or poultry, stuffed meats, seafood, poultry, or pasta, dishes that include previously cooked TCS ingredients. Right? So, say if you have some leftover food that you're reheating, it needs to go back up to 165. Any time and temperature control for safety foods must be reheated to at least 165. All right, minimum internal temperature for ground meat, 155. That's why ground meats can go on the next shelf up above poultry. We also have injected meats, including brined hams and flavor-injected roasts. Mechanically tenderized meats, which, again, it's instead of grinding the meat down, if it's literally been hammered down or tenderized in some kind of way. Ground meats from game animals, commercially raised and inspected. So game animals commercially raised, that means deer that are not just wild running around in the field. That means deer that have been raised on a farm for consumption purposes. So ratites, those include ostrich and emu. Not hugely popular in this country, but they are in other parts of the world. And then ground seafood, including chopped or minced seafood. And then shell eggs that will be hot held for service. Right, so they're shell eggs, as in not the pasteurized one that you can get in a carton, but ones that are still in their shell, that you've broken out from their shell. Ones that are going to be cooked and then held in a chafing dish. Must be cooked to 155. Okay, just to make sure that you fully, before you're going to hold them, that they've been fully cooked through. So 145 includes seafood. So seafood including fish, shellfish, and crustaceans. This also includes our chops and our steaks. So there's pork chops that we were doing yesterday. Our steaks that we can do. These are, and pork, beef, veal, and lamb. They all have to hit 145. Now, in a restaurant, you may have a steak that you cook to medium rare. And so that medium rare steak may only be, 130, somewhere around there. And so it's not going to hit that temperature. That's when you must make sure on your menu, you make it very clear to those customers. Eating undercooked meats and fish, eggs, can be detrimental to your health. You must make sure you warn those customers about those things. And then commercially raised game, as well as shell eggs that will be served immediately. So if I'm serving breakfast in a restaurant and I'm frying up some eggs, I can cook those to 145 if I'm putting it on a plate and serving it now. If I'm cooking those scrambled eggs, putting them in a chafing dish to be hot held, where it might be 10-15 minutes before you eat them from that chafing dish, then that's 155. Okay. They are 155. So that's the and what it comes down to, they're not considered poultry, but they're very close to it. So that's why it's 155 instead of 145. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. So when we come to roasts, right? So we're talking about large pieces of maybe beef that are being roasted up. You have some options, because it depends on exactly what your objective is and what kind of piece of meat that is, as to the best and safest way that you're going to cook it through, okay? So if you cook it to 130 degrees as the core internal temperature, then you have to cook it for at least 112 minutes, okay? It has to hit that 130 for 112 minutes, because we've got it where it's going to be underdone at that stage. But you have to hit it for at least 112 minutes at that temperature to be allowed to pull this through, okay? But as you can see, as you raise that core internal temperature that we cook it through to, that the length of time we have to hold it at that temperature dramatically goes down, because we're taking it through the temperature danger zone. We're killing the bacteria that you very often will find on it, okay? So basically, if you're doing it to 130, we're making sure we're giving that bacteria a hard time. We're making them very uncomfortable, hopefully destroying all of them by holding it at a hot temperature for a long period of time. Because they recognize some people don't want to have their roast cooked all the way through. They want it to be a little on the rare, on the not rare side, but on the maybe medium rare side. And so you want to be able to offer that ability. The way you do that, you have to cook it at that temperature for longer. It's a hard thing to do, to maintain an exact temperature that way, but that's what you need to do to make sure we're keeping the food safe. But if you take it all the way to 144, 5 minutes at 144 for the core internal temperature, not just cooking it to 144, but making sure you hold it at that temperature for 5 minutes, then we're good to go. Okay. So the minimum internal temperature for our safer types of foods, things like plant-based foods, like including vegetables, fruits, grains, pasta, rice, legumes like beans and refried beans that are going to be hot held for service. These are just 135. So we just have to make sure they are above the temperature danger zone. And then if you're holding them, again, you must hold them above 135 to make sure that we're maintaining them as well. If we partially cook meat, seafood, poultry, eggs, or dishes that contain these items, then never cook them for longer than 60 minutes during the initial cooking. Okay. Cool the food immediately after the initial cooking. Freeze or refrigerate the food after cooling it, and store it away from meats, from ready-to-eat foods. Because the fact is, these are not yet ready-to-eat foods. They are partially cooked. This is something that you have to be very, very careful of, to not allow them to be mistaken for ready-to-eat foods, and to also not turn into a food that could be a food pathogen harbor. Heat the food to the required minimum internal temperature before you sell it and serve it. Or cool the food if it's not going to be served immediately or held for service. Okay, are regular kinds of things that we do. If we're not going to be serving it immediately, we're going to cool it down rapidly. If your menu includes raw or undercooked TCS foods, time and temperature control for safety foods, you must note on it so asterisk this specific item. Place a footnote at the bottom of the menu indicating that the item is raw, undercooked, or contains raw or undercooked ingredients. We have to advise customers who order this food that the increased risk of foodborne illness. Post a notice in the menu. Provide this information using brochures, table tents, or signs, or even I've been in some restaurants where the server, when you order that medium rare steak, they say, I just need to make you aware that there is an inherent risk in eating undercooked meats. Absolutely. I still want my steak medium rare. Great. Make sure the customers are aware. The FDA advises against offering these items on a children's menu if they are raw or undercooked. So a children's menu, you may have like a 14-year-old eating from a children's menu. That medium rare steak might not cause them any difficulty at all. But you don't know how old some kids are who are eating from that kid's menu. If you have a kid's menu and you've got a 2-year-old that's eating off that kid's menu, then they may have some adverse reactions to something that isn't fully cooked through. So meat, poultry, seafood, and eggs, make sure that on kids' menus, just have it to the standard is that they are fully cooked through. Okay. Never serve raw seed sprouts, raw or undercooked eggs, meat, or seafood, over easy eggs, raw oysters on the half shell, rare hamburgers, or unpasteurized milk or juice to high-risk populations. So if you're working in a senior home and you know that you have a lot of individuals there who are definitely at risk, then we can never offer these things to them because the fact is they are at a higher risk of these being contaminated and causing illness. Also, if you work in a hospital that has some people who have an immune system which is compromised in some kind of way, these can all be problems. Okay, so what do you think? Which one's going to cool faster? So I've got this mashed potatoes that's in a plastic container, plastic chafing dish insert, hotel pan, and I've got refried beans on the right-hand side in a metal container. Which one will cool quicker? Got A, I got B. So it is actually B because it's a conductor, right? So think about the actual container and what it's made of. If it's metal, it's going to conduct that heat out much, much quicker. It's going to radiate out very, very quickly and conduct through the surface of that container. If it's in a plastic container, it's an insulator. It's going to hold that heat much longer. Okay, so which food will cool quicker? I got chicken broth on the left in a metal container. I got refried beans on the right in a metal container. You're saying chicken broth? Yeah, yep. The chicken broth will cool quicker because it's less dense. The more dense the food, the slower it actually radiates that heat out. Food can be cooled by adding ice or cold water as an ingredient. That's one method. It can be used when cooling soups or stews. The recipe is made with less water than required, and so you add ice to it to cool it down. And cold water or ice is added after cooking to provide the remaining water that's required for that food product. So all of those items, that's a method of cooling that's possible. And so, in fact, sorry, I was going to go over a couple of others. So we can also use an ice bath, which when we're going to fill up that sink with ice water, and we can place that big pot of chili, make sure you stir it, because that internal area there is going to hold and harbor a lot more of that heat. Stir it to allow that heat to dissipate much quicker. Leave the lid off. Make sure that the container that it's in is metal, so it dissipates that heat quicker. Don't put it into a plastic container and put it into an ice bath, because it's not really going to make a huge difference because it's an insulator. You can also use an ice paddle, as you can see right in the center here. They're basically you fill them up with water, put them in the freezer overnight, and so it's literally like you're stirring it with an ice stick, except for it's not going to melt into the food, so it's not going to water it down if that would be an issue. Okay. When storing food for further cooling, loosely cover the food containers before storing them. So otherwise you're going to get a lot of condensation buildup, but plus it's going to trap some of that heat in as well. Allow the heat to escape. Food can be left uncovered if protected from contamination. Where's the best place in the refrigerator I can place something that's been fully cooked that I need to cool down rapidly without it getting contaminated? Yes, exactly. I'll right up the top. Nothing's going to drip down onto it, right? Let's see, storing uncovered containers above other food, especially raw seafood, meat, poultry, will help prevent cross-contamination. Okay, so cooling foods. Let's look at the times. We talk about this all the time when we're doing this in the kitchen. So we can go from 135 to 70 degrees. We're allowed 2 hours for that. We then go from we then have to take it down to 41 degrees within the next 4 hours. So we can get 6 hours total. However, if you're asked on the ServSafe exam, how long do I have to cool it down? The answer isn't 6 hours. It's 2 hours to get from 135, the top of the temperature danger zone, down to about room temperature, 70 degrees, because that's the most dangerous part of the temperature danger zone. That's the part of the temperature danger zone when bacteria just love life. They have a wonderful time. They're bathing in their food, in the warmth, in the moisture. The whole environment is there, ready for them. So we cool that part down the quickest. Then after that, into the refrigerator, keep monitoring it, keep stirring it, right? You have to keep it moving to dissipate any of that heat. If you fail to hit 70 within 2 hours, you only have the alternative of either throwing it out or reheat it back up through the temperature danger zone rapidly, and then after that you can cool it again. The problem with this is that your vat of wonderful chili that tasted great, if you keep on heating it and cooling it to try and hit this 2 hour time limit, then eventually the quality of your chili is going to go down. Right, so it's not preferable for the quality of the food you're making. But that's the method that you can use if you fail to get it done. And we hear on the Dirty Restaurant episodes where places do fail quite often at doing this, but it's nonsensical. You don't have to have any big expensive equipment. You just have to be smart about it. Spread the food out wider, put it in an ice bath, use different methods to actually cool it down as rapidly as you can. What temperature should a beef sandwich for immediate service be reheated to? 145, 165, or any temperature? Second? You're saying A?
A or B.
Either A or B. We're going to choose one. So this may be a little bit of a surprise. It's any temperature. Okay, and this one, again, this is the reason why we have to talk about some of these things. If it's a sandwich which will be served immediately, and that's the critical part of this question, immediate service, there is no specific temperature that has to be placed on this. Now we're making the assumption that beef is already cooked, right? Because it's for a sandwich, but it does not require a specific temperature for reheating that beef, because it's going to be served and assumed to be consumed immediately. Okay. Commercially processed and packaged ready-to-eat foods. So reheat those to an internal temperature of at least 135. You just have to bring them through the temperature danger zone. Most of the time, most of these types of things, like mozzarella sticks or whatever, they've been processed in such a way. Case, you gotta have it. You gotta have it. Most of those have been processed in a very sanitary space, and they're generally fairly low-risk foods. There's very little risk with them. They still have to go through that temperature danger zone to the other side, but they don't have to. They don't have to be cooked to any higher than that. Now, this is our third and final part of the flow of food service. Sorry, flow of food, and we're specifically looking at service. So, what do you think? Can the temperature gauge on a holding unit be used to check the temperature of the food that's inside? So, if I've got a hot holding unit, a hot box, and it says 135 degrees, can I take that as being the correct temperature to hold our food? No, right? We can't assume that, because it may read that on the outside. That thermometer that's on there could be wrong, or it could be that there may be a variance in temperature. It may be 135 at the top, but it may only be 125 at the bottom. We can't know for sure. Or when the food went in, maybe there was a delay in finishing off those mozzarella sticks and getting them into the hot box. So maybe they cooled down to about 125. That hot box won't necessarily heat them up to 135. Certainly not rapidly enough to bring them back out of the temperature danger zone. Right? We have to check the food itself. Can you use hot holding equipment to reheat foods? No, definitely not. Reheating foods in a hot holding unit is you're just waiting for problems to come up, because they only are maintaining that heat. They're not built to cook foods or to reheat foods rapidly enough. When we're reheating, we're going through that temperature danger zone. It's always a risk every time we travel through that temperature danger zone. That's why we do it as fast as we possibly can. Cold food can be held without temperature control for up to 6 hours. Okay, this is a vital number. So cold food, and that's why I've got it highlighted, can be held without temperature control for up to 6 hours if the following happened. If it was held at 41 or lower before removing it from refrigeration, which you would hope, if it's in a refrigerator, that's what it should be doing, and if it never exceeds 70 degrees Fahrenheit during that service time. Throw it out if it does exceed 70 degrees, okay, about room temperature. It has if it has labeling to specify the time that it was removed from the refrigeration and the time that it must be thrown out. And if it's sold, served, or thrown out within those 6 hours. Okay, so we've got a wedding going on. It's a warm day outside, about 75 degrees. I can place this food out of the refrigerator. I've got to make sure that I label it when it came out, when it must be thrown away at the absolute latest. If we have a wedding going on, it's 11:30, we take that food out of the refrigerator, so it's chilled down, probably about 35, 33 degrees, somewhere around there. We place that cheese platter out. It's 11:30 in the morning. What time can I let it sit out till? Maximum.
How long can you let it chill for?
How long can I let it sit out? Maximum.
4 hours. No.
Right, so what time, if it's 11:30 in the morning, what time can it stay out till? 5:30. Right, so it can technically stay out until 5:30 in the afternoon. As long as it was held at 41 or below before, which, yep, it was, as long as it doesn't exceed 70 degrees Fahrenheit at any time. Now, the daytime temperature during that particular day was 75 degrees. It might go over 70. Right, so that's why we have to monitor it. We have to check it every now and again to make sure. As soon as it hits over 70, that cheese has got to go. That cheese platter's out. But if it never does, if it cools off in the afternoon and it never actually hits 70 degrees, then technically you can leave that cheese platter out for 6 hours. Now the cheese might start curling up on the edges because it might start drying out, so the quality of it may not be there anymore. But as long as these things apply, then you're okay. All right? It's important that you remember these things. Hot food. It's a little different. So hot food can be held without temperature control as long as it was held at 135 or higher before we removed it from that heat source, from that hot box. As long as it was labeled specifying when the item must be thrown out, and as long as it's sold, served, or thrown out within 4 hours. Okay? So I have the chicken tenders. They came out of the hot box at noon. Then, as long as they came out of that hot box at 135 Fahrenheit or above, I've got 4 hours until they have to be disposed of. Kind of a long time. These are things that can trip students up when it comes to the ServSafe certification. Okay? Because in your mind, you start thinking about, I'm not going to leave some chicken fingers out for 4 hours. You know, if I made them for a late lunch at 2 o'clock, technically at 6 o'clock, you can technically eat them then, even if they've just been sitting out all afternoon. But a lot of people are saying, that's gross. Well, it probably is, because the quality of it won't be the same, right? It's not going to be great. It's probably going to be kind of dried out. It's not going to be good. But in terms of bacterial properties, in terms of food safety, you are allowed 4 hours for that to sit out. Make sure that you specify on the label to say when it must be thrown out. Because say if you're a caterer and you drop these food items off at the correct temperature, you must write down that time on there, so that because then if you leave before it's disposed of, you need to make sure that people aren't going to eat it after that time. Okay, so you must make sure that we're labeling these things up so that they are disposed of within that time constraint. You may get regulatory approval to prepare written in order to do hot holding food without temperature control. So you prepare written procedures as to how you're going to make it work. So say if you're a caterer and you don't have chafing dishes and things like that, then you need to make sure you prepare written procedures as to how you're going to do it and control it, and make sure that it's going to be disposed of in the appropriate time. Or get written approval in advance, maintain the procedures, and make procedures available. Okay? So you have to be fully open, you have to have a plan for all of these things to make sure that we don't start producing toxic food. Is this being handled safely? So this person is sprinkling some parsley on top with bare hands. Right, we have a problem here, because food handlers must wear single-use gloves when handling ready-to-eat foods, including that garnish. Right, it's important. Are these food items being handled safely? So each item, it looks like it's in a refrigerated display here. Each item has its own scoop or tongs or ladle to be able to pull from. Yeah, we look like we're doing pretty well here. There's not going to be cross-contamination occurring. Everything has its own space and it's being maintained correctly. Is this food item being handled safely? We've got the tongs just over on the side. So no. So utensils used to handle TCS foods, time and temperature control for safety foods, must be stored in the food. If serving a non-TCS item, the utensil can be stored on a clean and sanitized surface such as a plate. But this is a TCS food. Okay? That's how we're going to avoid cross-contamination, because we're specific. This tong is for this thing. Okay? Spoons or scoops used to serve mashed potatoes or ice cream can be stored under running water. Right? You may sometimes see in an ice cream parlor, if they're actually scooping the ice cream instead of doing the soft serve, if they're scooping the ice cream, they'll have what looks like a kind of a sink right next to where they are, and the scoops just drop into that sink, and there's running water running over that all the time. It's part of the actual system that's set up. In a container of water maintained at 135 or hotter, right? So you're basically maintaining those scoops high enough that they're outside of the temperature danger zone. Take-home food containers brought back by guests can be refilled if they were designed for reuse. So the containers that we use, they are designed for reuse. They can be put through a dishwasher, sanitized, and reused. I can't do that with something like styrofoam, right? Styrofoam is not made to be reused. Provided to the guest by the operation and cleaned and sanitized correctly. That's why when people return those containers to us, we still wash them and sanitize them. We never just say, well, I'm sure they must have done a good job cleaning them. You can never trust that. You have to make sure that they are correctly cleaned and sanitized. The food is your responsibility. Take-home beverage containers brought back by guests can be refilled if the beverage is not a TCS food. So things like sodas and stuff, it's all good. The container will be refilled by the same guests. The container can effectively be cleaned at home and in the operation. And the container will be rinsed with fresh, hot water under pressure before refilling. And the container will be refilled by staff or the guest using a process that prevents contamination. If you preset tableware, prevent it from being contaminated. For example, you can wrap it or cover the items. It's unnecessary to wrap or cover table settings if extra or unused settings are removed when the guests are seated or cleaned and sanitized after they've arrived, or after they've left rather. So if you have a table that's set for 6 people and only 5 people sit down, if you immediately remove that silverware, then that silverware can be used. If you leave it there while the guests enjoy their meal, it must be sanitized, cleaned and sanitized afterwards. You can't rely on, well, I don't think they touched it. I don't think they breathed over it, because they probably did. You just can't trust it. Just make sure anything that was there during the guest's time on that table, everything's going to go. Okay. Never reserve food returned by one customer to another customer, right? That would seem kind of gross. Why on earth would you do that? The temptation would be there if you have if you have a business that may be struggling financially, which lots of them are. It may be to, well, this chicken dish came back. It doesn't look like they bit into it. I don't think. You don't know what happened to it. You don't know someone sneezed over it. You don't know someone dipped their finger into it. You just cannot trust it. It has to go. Uncovered condiments, uneaten bread, plate garnishes, any of these things you can never reserve. Generally, only unopened packaged foods in good condition can be reserved. So if you have condiment packets on the table in a condiment holder, that's why restaurants will very often have those individual condiment packets on things, because those are acceptable, and wrapped crackers or breadsticks are acceptable and to remain on that table if they didn't consume those. To prevent contamination, place food in display cases, package foods to prevent contamination, stock foods using correct utensils, and never use ice as an ingredient if it was used to cool food or beverages before. We already talked about that, right? Once that ice has been used to cool other things down, like Coke cans or anything like that, it's trash after that. You can never use it as food after that. Do not offer raw meat, seafood, or poultry unless it is sushi or raw shellfish. The portions will be cooked immediately on the premises, like Mongolian barbecue, or if it's raw, frozen shell-on shrimp or lobster. When labeling bulk food in self-service areas, make sure that the label is in plain view by the guests. Include the manufacturer or process label provided with the food. As an alternative, provide the information using a card or a sign or other labeling method. But we have to make sure we inform the people who are going to consume it. So for other bulk items in self-service areas, make sure that the label is not needed for. A label is not needed for bulk packaging foods such as bakery products or unpackaged food portioned for customers if the product makes no claim regarding health or nutrient content, or no laws regarding the labeling exist in that particular locality, or the food is manufactured or prepared on the premises, or the food is manufactured or prepared as another regulated food operation or processing plant owned by that same person. What do you think? Is this food being delivered safely? Cardboard box with the metal disposable chafing dishes being delivered in that kind of way. So I would assume it's hot food because it's in metal containers. Is that being delivered correctly? No? Why not? What's possibly wrong with that? It's open. Well, but the food's not open though, right? That's got a lid on it.
I guess nothing. I guess it was fine. I mean, it just
Well, what could happen to that food, that hot food? I'm sorry?
The temperature isn't being maintained.
Right. It's not maintaining any heat. That heat's just rushing right out, right? So yes, the food, if it's being delivered, needs to be in insulated containers so that way it stays hot. Hot food, hot, cold food, cold, right? So regardless of whether you're delivering a salad or delivering hot food, make sure it's in insulated containers so that it arrives safe and sound at the right temperature. When delivering food off-site, labeling the food with use-by dates and times and reheating and service instructions is imperative. Clean the inside of delivery vehicles regularly and check internal food temperatures regularly as well. Make sure that the service site has the correct utilities, safe water for cooking, dishwashing, and hand washing, garbage containers stored away from food prep storage and service areas, and store raw meats, poultry, and seafood and ready-to-eat items separately. Right? We all know that. To keep vended food, so we're talking now about vending machines and those types of operations. To keep this food safe, check the product shelf life daily. Okay, so you may have sandwiches that might be okay for a few days, but you can't leave them any longer than that. So you're always going to want to have dates written on them. So refrigerated food prepped on site and not sold in 7 days must be thrown out, right? And that's 7 days including the date that it was prepared. Not 7 days starting as of tomorrow's day one. Today is day one, always. Keep TCS, time and temperature control for safety, food, so the high-risk foods, at the correct temperature. And dispense TCS foods in its original container and wash and wrap fresh fruits with edible peels before putting them into the machine. So if you have apples, then wash the apples first. We have to assume that whoever's buying something from a vending machine, that they have no other way of cleaning it before they eat it. Okay, so we have to do that for them.